Wow, what a controversial yet brave title for a video. I can hear the crowds barreling through the streets, chanting my name and preparing to carry me to my throne. What a dream. Fantasies aside, what exactly do I mean by forget but don't forgive? Well, it's simple. Vanguard Zombies was one of the biggest blunders in Call of Duty Zombies history. While I personally have faith that things are going to be just fine with the Zombies mode in general, that doesn't mean I am blind to the travesty that just took place. I do think that for the most part, Vanguard Zombies was an isolated incident, but I know that dissenters of Cold War Zombies will have a completely different perspective. So where should blame reside? Why exactly did Vanguard Zombies have such a tumultuous development cycle? What does this imply for the future of Call of Duty Zombies? Before we answer any of these burning questions, I think we should start at the beginning. I think it should be stated that Cold War Zombies was quite a strange title. It polarized the community more than it's ever been. And it also started out very weak from the perspective of giving fans the amount of content that we have come to expect. While I don't think anybody was thinking that we would get 4 maps at launch like we did in 2018, we thought at the bare minimum there would be at least 2, similar to something like Black Ops 3 offering Shadows of Evil and The Giant, respectively. This lack of things to do really set a sour tone for some Zombies fans, and I was included in that group. However, I realized I was wrong, and I started to realize just how good Cold War Zombies was right around the summer of 2021. And now I'm saying this because Cold War had a fairly rocky start, as did Vanguard Zombies, but Treyarch caught up to themselves quickly and finished the entirety of Cold War's life cycle with a bang. And without giving too much away here, the same thing cannot be said about Vanguard Zombies at all. So what exactly happened? Well, during the ending days of Cold War Zombies, there was an intel drop that subtly informed players what the Vanguard Zombies narrative was kind of going to be like. We knew that on our new Dark Ether timeline that we would be heading to World War II and playing things out in a prequel designed to lead us up to the beginning of Cold War Zombies. And at this point, fans were still so infatuated with the success of Cold War that Vanguard Zombies hadn't even registered as important quite yet, at least not on our gamer radar, for lack of a better term. But then everything changed when we found out that Treyarch was going to be leading the development for Zombies inside of Vanguard. And I think most people were really excited for this bit of information because Sledgehammer didn't really knock Zombies out of the park last time, albeit it was better than Vanguard Zombies, but it still wasn't the best experience in the world. So getting Treyarch to work on this mode, especially hot off the heels of Cold War, what could go wrong? I even remember the trophy list leaking for the launch of the first map before we knew anything about Vanguard Zombies. Sacrificial hearts, covenants, artifacts, the wheels started turning in my mind, and the prospect of a heavily stylized Zombies experience was right up my alley, especially after Cold War, whose maps weren't exactly my favorite when compared to experiences like Ancient Evil, Drak, or even Origins. It wasn't long after we learned that Treyarch was going to be leading Zombies that our first big info dump was revealed to fans. There was an amazing trailer, and it was here where we had our first look at this brand new mode, and it was just like we had thought. The artistic direction was so good, it was so on point. There were demons and hellish looking zombies in a darker, grittier atmosphere, and it looked fucking badass.
From beyond this mortal realm. Our strength is yours. We are joined now. Mortal children, yield or die. Why aren't you scared of me? Why do you care for me? When we all fall asleep, why do we? Come here. What is it exactly? take the hatchet to bury your friend right now. I gotta sell my soul, cause I can't say enough.
Rise, Revenants! A new chapter of warfare is about to begin.
I wanna end.
Oh my god, looking at this now and knowing what I know. What a fucking mess. But then, Zombies fans did what Zombies fans do best, and they broke down that trailer. We started watching it over and over, and we started noticing that things were off. The map just wasn't sitting right. This new concept called Daranfang, it looked exactly like a bunch of multiplayer maps that we had seen in weeks prior with the beta. The Pack-a-Punch machine was just sitting there out in the open, and there were all these portals everywhere, and there was a zombie with a machine gun. The perks were these strange fountains, and don't get me wrong, not everything here was necessarily bad, but it got our zombies antenna to pop up, and the signal incoming to our brains was a fat dose of, oh shit. And then our biggest fears were confirmed. Developer trailer dropped discussing the new zombies mode, and this was the moment when everything changed, and we knew that it was gonna be a rough year. This new Zombies mode was a mix between objective-based gameplay and traditional round-based survival. But instead of something similar to Outbreak, the maps were smaller and the objectives, well, they're just bastardized versions of what we already had experienced inside of Cold War Zombies. And no one liked this particular game mode. I mean, Mr. Raffle Waffle set the tone by giving us this meme. You see, the problem was there were a bunch of little things wrong. And when you have a bunch of little things wrong, or you change a bunch of little things, there is a compounding effect, and the repercussions can almost become irreparable. Also, some of the changes that Treyarch had added or removed didn't really make any sense and seemed arbitrary at best and detrimental at worst. Pack-a-Punch cost went up from 5,000 at level 1 to 7,500, and the perks needed to be bought a total of 20 times with a cost of 75,000 points. There were no doors, no wall buys, and no quests or traditional survival-based mechanics. Now, just put this in the back of your mind for a second because we are coming back to this particular topic. Now, you would think that this would have more of an Outbreak flair to it, but the implementation of all the features that made Outbreak so unique, they just weren't there. And what was most upsetting was how many steps backward we took from just a few weeks prior inside of Cold War Zombies. Treyarch wanted to keep certain things from Cold War, like the crafting table, salvage, self-revive systems, elements of the perk system, the point system. There was a lot carried over, but then they changed the basis of how all these things function and even removed features. The perks, like I said before, you needed to buy 4 of each, and every time you bought the perk, you would get a little bit more of the perk, just the original effect, as opposed to Cold War Zombies, where you would buy the perk one time and have 5 additional features associated with the perk's original ability. You would acquire these features as permanent unlocks by getting Dark Aether Crystals as an out-of-game currency to unlock these features. Well, in Vanguard, that was entirely scrapped. You wanted to buy Jug in Vanguard? Well, you had to buy it 4 times to get its full effect. Not to mention, level 1 is free, level 2 is 2,500, level 3 is 5,000, and level 4 is 7,500. Now, I'm not just reading random numbers, by the way, I'm building up to something here, and I promise we will get to it in just a moment. Pack-a-Punch initial cost increased, like I mentioned, and they also removed all of the ammo mods that you could attach to your weapon: Shadow Blast, Cryo Freeze, Brain Rot, things like that. The crafting table only had one type of salvage currency, effectively removing any discernible difference between low and high value items. They also raised the cost of armor and had no score streaks to purchase as well. At launch, there were only 3 objectives, and how do I put this? They were trash. And at last, there was the DLC content, which in Cold War Zombies, we ended the game's life cycle with 10 total perks, 4 of which were added into the game via DLC: Tombstone, Death Perception, Mule Kick, PhD Slider, not to mention all of the field upgrades. I think Cold War added 3 more after launch. It was Frenzied Guard, Toxic Growth, and the Electric Boogaloo one. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. In Vanguard, they just removed all of that content. All the added progression of making our characters better, just poof, gone. It only seemed reasonable to expect that the content from Cold War Zombies, that was a direct correlation to the game that we were getting with Vanguard, it was reasonable to expect it to be there, and it just wasn't. And I bet you're asking yourself now, well, yeah, of course, we saw this in the DLC season, didn't we? No, you didn't. It never came. Nearly all of that content that we received in Cold War Zombies never returned. return. And while Treyarch did not entirely get rid of every single feature that we were used to, they created a strange filtration system that housed all of the game mechanics that they couldn't fit into this current build. This system was called the Altar of Covenants, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, it was absolute ass. In the next section, we're going to dive into exactly why this system exists, but for now, let's talk about what it actually did. So in games like BO3, BO4, and even Cold War, all of the gameplay mechanics and features were spread out across different areas so that the player could get a little taste from everything and be collectively overpowered. This gave the players variety and the ability to curate their playstyle to any given match. For example, in Cold War, you had the perk system that allowed you to have an extra 5 tiers of bonus features to every single perk in the game. This also happened with field upgrades as well. You also could go to the Pack-a-Punch machine and add ammo mods to all of your weapons to make them more powerful. And don't forget about the upgrade station that allowed you to level up your weapon's rarity from common to legendary at your own pace with 2 levels of salvage currency. Every single one of these previous features was jammed into the Altar of Covenants. If you wanted to add dead wire to your gun, you had to use the Altar of Covenants. If you wanted to pick up salvage faster, you had to use the Altar of Covenants. If you wanted to get Deadshot Daiquiri, you had to use, you guessed it, the Altar of Covenants. And all of the features that didn't get shoved into this never-ending pit of despair were just lessened in other ways. So instead of being able to upgrade your weapon's rarity, your rarity was now associated with your Pack-a-Punch machine level. The whole premise removed any level of depth and nuance that our previous Zombies modes had, because you didn't have full control over your gameplay experience. What made the Covenant system even more incredulous than it already was that it was based entirely off of RNG. Now, it's not like you went up to it and there was a drop-down menu of every single ability at a cost correlated with it. No, that would have been way too easy. Instead, Treyarch thought it would be smart to have these second-tier perks randomize every round and cost a sacrificial heart, which ended up being some weird currency that you would require after completing these horrendous objectives. I know it seems like I'm being bitter and I gave this game no chance at all from the beginning, but that's not true. In fact, it was the exact opposite. I was in a much more open-minded position because I had realized how wrong I was about Cold War Zombies. Not to mention, I was really obsessed with the art design and I thought it was going to make the game mode absolutely killer. Go watch my previous reaction videos. So why exactly am I so annoyed with this game? Well, it's not because of the Altar of Covenants or the crafting table or the lack of wonder weapons or the objective-based mode of Vanguard Zombies. It's because this game cost full price. The multiplayer, campaign, and Zombies mode were all abominations of their former selves, and Activision had the balls to charge fans $70 for it. Even more if you wanted the deluxe or whatever edition, full price for this game. And I know there's no going back after this, but I just can't help but feel completely and utterly lied to. And I know I'm not alone with this feeling, because a number of you have told me that you feel the same way. But still, even after all of that, Treyarch heard our complaints, and after the first 2 horrendous maps, they decided to fix, and I use that term loosely, the Vanguard Zombies mode. But how do you fix what is irrevocably broken? That's a good question, and I wonder if it ever happened. After the first 2 Zombies maps were released, fans were really pissed. And I mean, like, really pissed. Treyarch thought it would be wise to take bits of Shinonuma that were inside of Duranfang and build the rest of it out so that fans could have what they wanted, which was a traditional round-based survival experience. For the sake of simplification, I'm just going to call this term round-based. I know that modes like Onslaught, Outbreak, Duranfang, and Terra Maledicta are technically round-based, but I'm talking about traditional survival that we've been playing for years, okay? All right, let's continue. So Treyarch went ahead and they remastered Shinonuma. But why didn't they just do something like this from the very beginning? Well, I can give you an answer. Sledgehammer Games, a studio that was once headed up by Glenn Schofield and some other guy who I don't remember the name of, and it's now headed up by Aaron Halon, who I am sure is not stoked about putting out one of the worst selling Call of Duties of all time. I would say Bobby should have a chat with this guy about how to manage things, but I think you all know how well that would go. Sledgehammer has a track record that is in decline, as every single game that they have been a part of or released on their own has been objectively worse than the one before it. But that's not the complete picture as to why we are in the situation we are in today. You see, in 2018, Sledgehammer and Raven, they were apparently working on a Call of Duty game that was supposed to be coming out in 2020, right after Modern Warfare 2019. It was a Vietnam title, supposedly, and the direction of the game was tumultuous, to say the least. No one knows exactly exactly why, but rumor has it that the two studios just weren't seeing eye to eye, and Activision was like, yo, we're done here. And during the middle of BO4's life cycle, Treyarch was asked to stop production on their own game to clean up the mess that was caused by Sledgehammer and Raven, which is why we received Black Ops Cold War in 2020 rather than Treyarch releasing their title scheduled for 2021. Now, that's just generally how the COD cycle works. But you combine these circumstances with COVID, and you get the incomplete launch of Cold War. This means that Sledgehammer Games had a whole extra year to work on Vanguard, but for whatever reason, that still wasn't enough. And Sledgehammer Games, they could only handle putting out a campaign and a half-baked multiplayer mode. And Activision again asked Treyarch to clean up the mess that Sledgehammer made and make zombies and control ranked play inside of multiplayer. This means that from 2018 all the way through 2022, Sledgehammer has only handled 2 modes, while Treyarch developed Black Ops 4, Black Ops Cold War, Vanguard Zombies, and multiplayer ranked play. What the hell is Sledgehammer actually even doing at this point? I don't get it. This is why I have such a hard time actually being mad at Treyarch for anything here, because it's simply not their fault. Developing a game, listen, I get it, it's an enormous undertaking, one that costs time, money, and people's ingenuity, their blood, sweat, and tears. I get it. There is also the idea of just running a company, especially a corporation. It's grueling work. Putting out a product is no easy feat, but there are many companies that do this all the time, and they succeed with flying colors. Obviously, Treyarch knows exactly what they're doing. Otherwise, Activision wouldn't have to ask them to extend themselves to places unfathomable for most companies. I know there's a lot more under the hood that I am unaware of, and Treyarch isn't perfect either. There seems to be some sort of imbalance in the Call of Duty world where Infinity Ward does whatever the hell they want, while Treyarch is stuck babysitting the weird uncle that shows up wasted to their 3-year-old niece's first communion. This entire situation put both Activision and Treyarch in such a precarious position that it was likely a huge financial risk given all the work Treyarch had to do to keep up with Call of Duty's mechanical release schedule. The simple fact is that COD Vanguard was built using an updated version of Modern Warfare 2019's engine, and Zombies had not been built for that yet. While the COD engine is always a modified version of itself, the jump from Infinite Warfare to Modern Warfare 2019, it was colossal. And since Treyarch does things a little differently with Infinity Ward's tools, a simple copy and paste into Vanguard's development cycle, it just wasn't entirely possible. At least that's not the way you should look at it, from my understanding. And for you code nerds out there, I know I'm not exactly correct with my language here. I am just trying to paint a picture simply for the viewer. So go easy on me in the comments, alright? But what the hell does this all mean? Why am I even bringing this up? Well, it means that Treyarch not only took development resources from their own studio to help Sledgehammer Games, but they had to build everything inside of Vanguard Zombies from the ground up, and they had to do it fast. That's why we had objective-based modes. That's why we had bits and pieces of multiplayer maps everywhere. That's why the perk system wasn't fully developed, and that's why the Altar of Covenants was a catch-all for any and all extra gameplay features. Treyarch didn't have a choice, or at least Activision didn't give them great options to select from. Shinonuma's development wasn't really out of the kindness of Treyarch's heart, but more of a bartering chip of goodwill towards the community. They knew we hated Duranfang and Terra Maledicta, but they had some assets of Shinonuma inside of Duranfang, and they thought, hey, why the hell not build off of it? And by the time the Archon came out, there was just nothing left. Activision had abandoned Vanguard completely. Leakers have tweeted about the mounds of cut content from both multiplayer Warzone and Zombies. This isn't a game that could sustain itself, so Activision greenlit the bare minimum, which is exactly what the player base got. This is going to be a quick chapter because, quite honestly, there isn't much to say about Deviation Games other than I feel both excitement for the future of whatever they're building, as well as fear that the Zombies mode I love is nearing certain death. I, for one, feel a level of exhilaration that I have not felt in a long time when it comes to a studio, even though I know nothing about them other than Jason Blundell is one of the leaders of the company, which may seem like a dream to most COD Zombies fans, but in the meantime, what does that do for Treyarch Zombies? If you're not aware, a ton of classic Treyarch devs who have worked on Zombies since the beginning have left the toxic COD development cycle, as well as Activision's death grip, and began working for Blundell and the many other big names and talent at Deviation Games. Are they making a new Zombies game? Are they making a space-driven narrative game? Is it an FPS? Is it a third-person RPG? Honestly, the only people that know are Deviation Games themselves, and no matter how many times people try to wheeze it out of JC Backfire, the man's lips are sealed. But what's slightly confusing, if not not a bit worrisome, is that if they're not making a zombies-esque mode and they're taking developers away from Treyarch, you see where I'm going here? That can only impact the zombies mode negatively as far as I can see. However, I don't think Blundell would do something like that. He knows how passionate the zombies community can be. He built his entire reputation on the love and support we gave the mode. I really don't think that he would tank something this important without creating something to supplement that core audience. This doesn't mean that zombies will ever fail, of course. There's still Craig Houston, Kevin Drew, and Corky Lemcool, and many other familiar faces, but there are a lot of newcomers on the team that perhaps will inject some new and more modern techniques inside of zombies, but I worry a little bit. Cold War Zombies was built with a lot of these new developers, and now that they have some skin in the game, it seems likely that they're going to be able to show off some of their new talents in 2024. But while understanding the impact that Deviation games will have on Treyarch, I still think it's too soon to tell what will come to fruition in a negative context, if anything at all. Before we wrap things up, I think it should be noted that none of what I said here means I am letting anyone off the hook. If you sell a product to somebody, it should be the best version of what you promised that product would be. And clearly this was a big moment for the COD community at large, not just the zombies community. Generally, fans look back on the previous COD with those rose-tinted glasses, but I think this is the first time in history where a Call of Duty is not only not looked back upon fondly, but enhances our appreciation of the CODs that came before it, and hopefully the CODs that come after. As far as the zombies mode itself, there is a lot that needs to be done to redeem this train wreck, and even some things that weren't in Cold War Zombies that should be considered when moving forward. We need to have increased difficulty, which surprisingly Vanguard didn't do a terrible job with, but solving Easter eggs in 2 hours and beating the boss on your first try, it's just not fun. I understand making things accessible to players, but after the triumphant success that is Elden Ring, I really can't buy the excuse that people can't figure things out without their hand being held. The next thing on the list is more fantastical maps, better narrative, and amazing wonder weapons. The days of finding a Nazi lab and taking the parts around the map to create a mad scientist weapon, it's so overplayed that when we have a more epic storyline coinciding with the gameplay, it allows for anything to happen because there's no limitation by reality. Lastly, we need rewards. The idea of having nothing for the player to earn other than XP, it's quite frankly a joke, and dare I say a slap in the face. Yes, there are a few blueprints that you can earn, but they are too few and far between, and of course, like I've said many times, they're never the good ones, the heroics, the mastercrafts, the reactives. It's never anything like that. If I complete the Mauer der Toten quest 10 times with no downs, I should earn something. XP tokens and battle pass progression, they're fine things for passive rewards, but giving something back to your players keeps them engaged and from spending time in other games. Not to mention they have something to show off to their friends as well, who will then want to try to do what they did. Whether it's COD points, blueprints, special camos, or characters, I don't care. There just needs to be something, because whatever situation Activision creates, loot boxes or purchasable items, it always ends up being predatory. I hate to be brash because I love COD, I love zombies, and these developers are great, but Vanguard was an absolute mess, and it should have been stopped like halfway through its life cycle. Absolutely nobody wanted to play it. That being said, I still don't think it's fair to even consider Vanguard as part of the main COD conversation simply for how heinous it was. It's merely an anomaly. Activision was just trying to do too much, and putting Sledgehammer in charge of anything from here on out is the wrong move, as they can't even handle putting their shoes on the right feet. But while we experience Modern Warfare 2 and eventually COD 2024, we really will be able to tell and analyze the COD experience authentically, because there's not going to be any more excuses. There is no pandemic hurting developers. There is no mess to clean up from Sledgehammer. Microsoft is slowly but surely acquiring Activision Blizzard. Things, in my opinion, are on the up and up. And well, if the next two COD games, particularly Treyarch's title, are not up to the standard that the developers have set for themselves, then I'll have no hope for redemption for the franchise that is Call of Duty. Did you enjoy the video? Well, maybe consider leaving a comment right below that like button. I always want to give a huge shout out to all of those that support me so that I can continue to make content just like this. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will catch you all in the next video. Have a good day, everybody. Peace out.